Are you ready to get casual? Grab your favorite adult beverage or combustible plant and join us for our roundtable TTRPG discussion. Oh yeah, it's time for Casual Friday. And now, here are your hosts.
They said we couldn't do it, but we're here. Started at the bottom and now we're here. Hey everyone, I am GM Jim from Wizards and Wordslingers. Over there is...
I'm Brad from Dire Den.
Down here is...
Hey, I'm Ryan again. Still, what's up? I'm back.
We're all back.
Woo.
Like
We're
the
all
guy
back.
at the front said, this is Casual Friday. This is a podcast YouTube show where we discuss tater pigs.
Yeah,
Titter
he
pigs?
said it. He said the thing.
He said the thing. We need a flashing
Tater
kind of overlay
pigs.
secret word. But so that's what we're doing here, and right off the top, I should do the share screen, and right off the top, I'm announcing that I'm bringing fun back to this show.
Uh-oh.
I'm bringing it back.
Ready?
And
We did not discuss this.
No, I did not get consent to do this. These two are unwilling participants in this game. This game is called Name the Spell. And what's going to happen here is I am going to read a spell's components, and then these guys will get to guess what they think the spell is.
Mm.
Can we bet on who we think's gonna win?
Sure.
I give the odds to Twin Steel. He was doing better than the guess the magic item, and he's already in chat. He's here.
I was like, "Ooh, Brad's feeling confident." No, yeah, Twin Steel's a good. That's
Yeah,
a good bet.
no.
I also bet on Twin Steel.
Brad's calling his shot for someone else.
Yep.
All right, so
Smart
here's
money's on Twin Steel. Is what I'm saying.
here's a clue. 7 of the 8 spells are level 3 or lower. I tried to
Okay.
I tried to go reasonable. I think I may have picked some magic items that were a little too obscure last time. So here we go. Spell number 1. Components: bat fur and a drop of pitch or piece of coal. These are the material components for the spell.
Darkness.
Brad, what do you think?
I agree.
It is darkness.
Nice.
Yay!
Woo!
All right. Our
I win.
second spell.
Oh,
Components: a tiny strip of white cloth.
well, I expected more than that. A tiny strip of white cloth. There's a few like Shield of Faith or something. There's a few like abjuration things that are like this. It's not Shield of Faith.
I'm gonna go the other direction. I'm gonna go with fog cloud. I don't.
Mm.
Okay. It is aid.
Hey, oh, okay.
like a bandage.
Bandage.
Band-aid. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah.
if you think through the components, they
Yeah.
all have clues as to their purpose.
They're all very punny.
Yeah.
The next one: ashes from a burned leaf of mistletoe and a sprig of spruce.
Oh, I'll tell you, it's on the druid list.
Yeah.
Speak with plants feels wrong, and it's Christmassy. I'm getting Christmas.
Or it's a range attack spell because of mistletoe.
Oh,
I'm gonna need your final guesses, gentlemen.
I'm gonna go speak with plants, even though that's not the answer.
Plants.
Yeah.
Brad.
Entangle.
Spell is pass without trace.
Pass without trace.
Pass without trace. Is Santa sneaky? I don't see it. I don't get it.
Well, he's got to be. He's visiting billions of homes in a night without getting caught.
Yeah,
That's true.
yeah.
He's got to have some kind of magical aid up there.
What
All
class
right.
is Santa Claus? Hey, chat. What class is Santa Claus?
The next spell. Your material components are a twig from a tree that has been struck by lightning.
Witch bolt.
Oh, I think I was gonna say lightning bolt, and I knew that was wrong. I think it might be witch bolt, but I'll go with lightning bolt
It
just to
is.
hedge. Okay.
Well,
I
it is
got
witch
one.
bolt. And next up, a chip of mica. This is a little more complicated.
Chip of mica. This is this. I'm getting like it's not scrying, but I'm getting like divinatory. Black mirror. I'm gonna go scrying. I know that's wrong.
Scrying. Okay, what do you got, Brad?
I'm gonna go with mirror image.
Shatter.
Shatter.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Chip of mica.
Okay.
All right, and either a small leather loop or a piece of golden wire bent into a cup shape with a long shank on one end.
Message?
It's a good guess.
Right? There's a cop, but I think that's just like a piece of copper wire. Golden
Mhm.
wire. Golden wire. Is this like summon steed?
Brad, what you got?
Hmm. I'm
You're
drawing
both
a
gonna
blank.
kick yourself when I reveal that it is levitated, so you don't fly
Levitate.
away.
Oh.
It's like a handle. Or the opposite. It's like the subway strap, and you.
I
Mary
wasn't.
Poppins
Yeah.
it.
I wasn't anywhere close to that. I was.
No,
never
I wasn't.
gonna
I
get
wasn't
that.
gonna get there.
I think there's one more. A lodestone and iron fillings. I'll go and tell you, I'm pretty sure this is the one that is above 3rd level.
Is
Like
minute meteors.
Yeah, I was gonna say meteor storm. Yeah, they're definitely summoning
Storm,
little things from the sky.
reverse gravity.
Reverse
Okay.
gravity. Okay, lodestone. Okay, that makes
And
sense.
I think that was the last one. Oh, no, there's one more. Components, tiny tarts, and a feather that is waved in the air. What spell?
God,
material
is it?
component
It's not.
for it?
Is it hideous laughter? Tasha's hideous laughter.
What do you think, Brad?
Tiny tarts. I'm going Crown of Madness.
Ryan is correct. It is Tasha's hideous laughter. Hey,
Redeem-
pretty sure that was
redemption.
the last one. That was
Slightly
the
less
last
than half
one.
of those.
Yeah, I figured that last one was a reference to the Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderlands. So I figured it was one of those two. And Ryan went with hideous laughter. So
Okay, so that was the spell component game. Now we've got what is potentially going to be a new segment on the show. We're going to get to talking about the teases from the Dungeon Master's Guide, and if there's time, we'll continue our discussion on the Player's Handbook because we don't have enough D&D books to talk about currently. But this new segment is Question of the Week. Brad, take it away.
So last week we kind of mentioned something when we were talking about the Dungeon Master's Guide and how there's so many different ways to DM. So the question of the week is, how do you DM? And what got me thinking on this is last night I finished my campaign, which I was running the Lost Mines of Phandelver into Shattered Obelisk, right? And I had started that campaign with a sandbox where I mixed in, Sunless Citadel and Expedition. No, not the. What's the starter box with the white dragon?
Icefire Peak.
Icefire Peak. Yeah. So
More
so
dragon, less fewer aliens in that one.
Yeah. So I mix and match a bunch of adventures. So, and that's kind of my DM style, right? So I started thinking about like DM styles and like your preference. So, I have options here. So the question is, how do you DM an adventure? Do you start with a pre-made adventure, right? Which and this list I'm calling hardbacks. So if you're running like a Pathfinder adventure path, I don't think they actually make those in hardback anymore. Maybe they do, but the Wizards of the Coast hardback books. When you're running one of those, do you run it like chapter by chapter? Do you try to hit all the wickets in that adventure? Or do you just loosely use those adventure paths? Or are you more of a module guy? Like using the old AD&D module format where you kind of stitch together multiple different adventures, multiple small adventures. Matt Colville has talked about that on more than one occasion. Or do you completely homebrew? What is your DM style? Like, how do you DM? So that's the question of the week. So chat, feel free to chime in on how you DM. And what about you guys? Jim, what is like your approach to that?
Well, I've only ever run, I think, one WotC adventure beginning to end. That was Lost Mine of Phandelver. I think I've run it like 3 times. That was the only adventure that I've ever 100%ed. And that was really only the first time I ran it. Everything else that I've run is I don't buy adventures with the idea of running them beginning to end. I have too many ideas, and every time that I've run, the second and third time I run Lost Mine of Phandelver and anything else, I start running the adventure. I use their NPCs, I use their locations, their treasure, their encounters, and then I'm going to throw in things just depending on which way the players want to take it. I buy most of the WotC adventures, but I buy most of them for specific maps and encounters. I can go get a map anywhere, but filling it up with monsters and treasure is a pain in the butt, and so it's nice if WotC does that work for me. But like, I want to be the warden of the story, and if my players or I want to do something that's different than what the written adventure says, I have absolutely no problem veering away and then even ditching the book if it feels like it, if that feels like what's right. So I guess my answer is somewhere between C and D.
Gotcha.
Like even more encounters stitched together, not necessarily modules.
Gotcha. So you're taking bits and pieces out of various products and kind of weaving your own story with them.
Generally, yeah, because I feel like if I stick to the adventure too much, it's going to feel railroady at some point, especially, based on choices they make.
Right.
I don't want to... I think early in my DM career, I felt like I needed to course correct my players. And that's something I've fortunately grown out of. I'm the one who needs to course correct if the story veers in a direction I didn't anticipate.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Ryan, what about you?
My answer is all of the above. Part of it depends on... I get bored easily, so I always need to do the next thing. Part of it is like time pressure too. I also just finished a run through Shattered Obelisk. An amalgam of groups that have actually run through Lost Mine of Phandelver, got together, started at 5. We've went through pretty much as written. I don't think anyone's running exactly what's written in the book, and if you are, I'm scared of you. But in the past, I've done an amalgam of different things. Like the other table, I ran a Dolmenwood campaign, and a lot of that was adventures from other sources. It's very sandboxy, so there's a lot of encounters that were like homebrewed or like literally cooked at the table, like hibachi fine dining style, just like watch me cook. And I've run like pure homebrew, and I almost at this stage kind of let the game decide or the players decide. Like I've dangled just this random map to an island that is Hot Springs Island, the Dark of Hot Springs Island, which I haven't run yet. It's not a giant, it's a small sandbox that's just like dope. And like I've dangled that in front of 3 campaigns now, and everyone's interested and no one's bit yet, but I'm always ready to just light what I'm running on fire and start something new. That's true Dungeon Master freedom in my mind.
Yeah, well, and like to your point, Jim, Ryan was talking about Dolmenwood a few weeks back, and I said that's a really great adventure. And Ryan, you asked me if I had run it, and I was like, well, no, I just stole a whole bunch of ideas out of it.
Yes.
and so for me, like that's what makes it difficult for me to like review. Like I don't do adventure reviews on my channel because like my opinion of an adventure is largely based on how many good ideas it gives me. Right? It's hard for me, like Jim, I've watched some of your reviews, which are great because you're you approach it, I guess, kind of like as the author that you are, and kind of look at it for like, what is here and how does it create a story, and does it do a good job of that? And I appreciate your reviews. My brain doesn't work like that. When I look at an adventure, I'm just like, I look at it like a spice shelf. I'm like, which spices do I want to take off the shelf? What do I want to steal out of this adventure to put in whatever I'm running now?
Yeah, that's funny. This reminds me of something that I was gonna bring up some other time, but I was thinking about the last few days. Is that it was in the late 20-teens, like 2017, 18, 19, around there. I saw a video with Chris Perkins, and or maybe it was Crawford. I don't know. One of the black shirt nerds at WotC, and he said
you have a hat
on. He said something like, well, we expect that Dungeon Masters are going to replace about 50% of the content in any published adventure they buy. And I was like, what? It's like, really? Where was I supposed to have learned this? Because I did not know, like, it doesn't say that at the beginning of the adventure. It's like, here's some stuff you'll like about half of it. It's like a Saturday Night Live episode. Like, there'll be some good stuff, some clunkers, some really terrible stuff.
It does explain a lot, because a lot of the books I'm like, man, this is like, I like half of this. This is half, and the other half is like, you guys didn't finish it. Like, it's half baked.
Well, and what's probably happening is like there's a dozen people like you, and then there's another dozen people who are picking it up, and they only like half of it too, but it's the other half.
They are my enemies.
So Swords and Stones says that he homebrews because he ain't smart enough to follow the published module. I identify with that. Like, growing up as a kid, I have dyslexia, so it was far easier for me to homebrew and make up my own adventures than it was to read a module cover to cover. Mm-hmm. Especially back in the AD&D days, where like there was no design, no layout. It was just like 40 pages of information crammed into 25 pages. Those old adventure modules were not easy for me to read as a kid, so I basically like read paragraphs here and there, looked at the pictures, and then made cool stuff.
There was a point where I was thinking of making a homebrew world, and at that time I was running campaigns in the Forgotten Realms, and I thought, running Forgotten Realms is great because it's already written, it's already been created, and making my own campaign world feels like so much work. But then I realized that I still, even though the Forgotten Realms stuff was already written, I still had to learn it. I was still putting out the same amount of effort, and then I realized that if I make my own campaign world, I'll remember it because I created it. I don't have to make it and learn it. I just have to make it. Then it is learnt, for I am the creator.
Yeah. Well, and Mike M has similar sentiments, saying that he's all homebrew because reading and carrying out an adventure for anything more than an idea seems like work, right?
Mike gets how Casual Friday operates. Low effort. Twin Steel also says, never run a pre-made adventure. Well, does anybody out there run pre-made adventures? Let us hear about it in the comments if there's any of you.
It's interesting. I'm actually like halfway through a script of like defense of published content, because I think I wish they were better, right? Which is why I've made some of my own. But like the one nice thing about running pre-published content is we have a common experience. You can go up to somebody on the internet in the game shop and be like, oh, this is how my group dealt with the red brands, right? Like, hearing about people's homebrew worlds, unless it's like masterful or has like a really brilliant idea, is a lot like hearing about someone's dreams. It's like, okay, this is much more interesting for you than it is for me right now. Whereas if we have some commonality and it's how your group approached a situation completely differently than my group did, that's interesting to me. It's like finding out that like you're on vacation, you find out someone's from your hometown. It could be your home state or home country, depending on how far field you are. And it's like, oh, we've been to the same place, we've had the same experiences, we have common ground here to talk about. Yeah, and it's as a player or a dungeon master, right? Like, I know Curse of Strahd is probably the most popular one of the 5e era. I Lost Mine of Phandelver almost doesn't count for some folks. Rend Head of Doom is also like very good twin steel. But it does give you a common ground when you bump into nerds in the wild.
Yeah, and you've run the same adventures. I would say of the pre-made adventures I've run, the ones that I have stuck the closest to the like chapter by chapter content are the shorter ones, right?
Yep.
The shorter they are, the easier it is to stick to the story and use, most of the components that are in there. Because I think back to Jim's original point, like the longer the story stretches out, the longer the campaign goes, the more potential deviations, and those deviations accumulate over time, and you end up going completely off the rails, which is fine and fun, but like, and I guess the value of the product is the book gets you there, right? It gets the ball rolling and gets you going. So even if you don't finish where the book expects you to finish, you've had a fun time, right? But I just thought that was an interesting question to discuss, since we're reviewing the Dungeon Master's Guide, and like realizing that everybody has different approaches. There are definitely people out there who do run the pre-published adventures or pre-made adventures, published adventures. They do run them, and they do run them close to chapter by chapter, right? So it's just, but that to me is very foreign. Like it's hard for me to wrap my mind around somebody who's able to do that.
Mm.
So, Ryan, you got an answer to your question. Santa's a cleric.
Patron saint of children.
Yeah. Can't argue. I can't argue with that.
Trickery domain cleric, I think.
Yes.
Like
yeah. All right. Hey, chat. What subclass?
A childlike trickery, right? Not like sinister trickery.
No, trickery doesn't have to be dark. You
Right,
know,
yeah.
there's this like the grand cosmic buffoonery of it all. It's a very like Zen, shock people out of their mundane world, and like here's a weird candy cane. Like, how the fuck did this get here? now you have some joy in your life. Also, I stuck it in your shoe for some reason.
Now I want to play a trickery domain cleric based on Santa, but not tell everybody, and to see how long it takes the rest of the players to figure out that I'm playing Santa.
And especially if you go into like those dark, like Santa's got some pagan roots. You go to like the old school ways where like, why is Santa red and white? Does it have something to do with that psychedelic mushroom that makes reindeers dance?
I know why Santa's red and white. You know why Santa's red and white?
Why?
Coca-Cola.
No, do they?
Yeah, and other prior to, I think it was early 20th century. Prior to that, Santa was shown wearing all colored coats, and in some countries he still does. But in Western countries, Coca-fied countries, that's that red comes. That's the Coca-Cola red.
Wow,
true story.
Brand Coca-Cola took over Santa Claus. I'm not even mad about it. Usually I'm like, hey, get the corpos, but like, good for them. Stranglehold on a holiday for a century. Good job.
Yeah.
I'm thirsty.
Are we ready to move on to our next topic here?
Yeah.
Which I guess, Brad, you're going to present this too, because you were definitely the most knowledgeable person in this trio on this topic.
Yeah, well, so we all know that D&D has wargamer roots, right? Like, D&D was built on wargaming. And this is a spot of the show where we want to talk about something that's not WotC related and plug indie companies and all that sort of stuff. So I thought we'd...
like Coca-Cola.
But Jim and I have both stumbled on new tabletop skirmish games that we have each... independently gotten ourselves into. And I love tabletop skirmish games, and I have way more than I have time to play. But I think the cool thing about skirmish games is, as opposed to the big war games, they don't take you as long to play. You can play them with just 2 players, so they're ideal for a night where like none of your D&D players show up, or maybe best case scenario, one of them shows up if they don't all show up, and then you can play a skirmish game, right? So, Jim, you want to tell us about the one you came across?
Sure. I had to turn off my green screen here for a second, actually. Because I saw, I don't know if we had this conversation on the show, but I was subjected to Instagram ads for a particular skirmish game for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then I went to my friendly local game store last weekend and saw it there and was like, okay, fine. Yes, Cosmos, I will buy it. So I got Necro Molds. Now this is a Play-Doh war game. And I'm going to show you, and they're not sponsoring this video or anything, I just found this. So it comes with these, so your war game figures, it doesn't use miniatures, it actually uses Play-Doh in molds. And you see each of these molds has got the stats on the back. And I am going to make an Insectomite live on the show. What's going to happen? Anything could happen. This is live. So here's my Play-Doh.
One great indicator of a good idea is like, I should have thought of that. Like it seems so simple and in reach, and I want it, and like I should have done that.
Well, and what's so brilliant is that each of these, you can have different guys in your army, and this guy has a 20 score for his Play-Doh. So you don't have points to build your army, you just get 3.5 ounces of Play-Doh, and you can make as many guys as you can from 3.5 ounces, and that's your army. So I'm going to put him in there. Oops, come back here. I'm going to put this guy in here and smush him down. And then pop him open. And there's my guy. I'm going to pull him out. That wasn't a great job, but it's serviceable. So there's my guy. I don't know if you can see him. This is an Insectomite. And then the really fun part of the game is that you put it all out just like regular wargaming, but then when this guy dies, the opposing player gets to smush him, and then he becomes part of the terrain. Dead guys stay on the terrain, and then this becomes terrain you can't stop in this space. So now you can use this strategically to like prevent players from meleeing you. And there's another thing that I like about Necromolds is it has 3 sets of rules. It has beginner, intermediate, and advanced rules. And the beginner rules are basically for tiny little kids. It's just like you both roll a die, the bigger one wins, get smushed. And then intermediate rules have attack dice and defense dice. And then the complex rules I haven't even gotten into yet. They have things like you can support, each character gets additional powers. So it's like a war game you can play with little kids, but then you can actually scale it up to be more complex if you feel like you can handle more rules. So that is...
Oh, and you don't have to paint the mini. Yeah.
Well, you can, though. They give you instructions for how, if you want to like make your guy, dry it out, and then paint it, you can. So you can have permanent guys, but then you don't get to smash them.
You don't get to squish them.
Squishing them is like half the fun.
So you have a material budget, like you have X amount of ounces of Play-Doh, and and you can build your team out of that.
Yeah, you get 3.5 ounces of Play-Doh.
That's really smart.
Yeah, so instead of like you have like I have 100 points, you have 100 points, we both have to build a team. It's just how much Play-Doh do we each have?
Yeah.
But then there's also stuff like there's a whole page of optional rules. It's like fan submitted rules, and one of them is the Play-Doh bomb. That you could, if you don't use all of your Play-Doh, you can take whatever's left, roll it to a ball, and drop it like a grenade on the battlefield for like a single-use attack. So there's all kinds of ways to customize the game, which is what I really, really enjoyed about it, because you're paying $0 for your miniatures. So you can do whatever you want with them. You don't have to super glue them together and get out the little paints, and
It's a great way to get your kids into gaming, and then from that get them into other games, and eventually into D&D or whatever. It's really cool.
Exactly. We got it on Sunday, and we played 3 times this week. And each game takes like an hour, so keeping his attention for a whole hour is crazy.
That's awesome. Well, Mike M mentions that Ash from Guerrilla Miniature Games did a playthrough of Necromolds, which is a perfect transition because the skirmish game I picked up is actually written by Ash. So he wrote Steel Rift, I think a couple years ago. But I just recently got into it because they came out with a new starter set. And this starter set is only $45, and it's everything you need to play. So this is a sci-fi mech warrior skirmish game, right? So giant robots against giant robots. And you get, so in the starter box, you get 6 mechs, so 3 per side, which is like the size of their small game. These miniatures, the ones that come in this $45 box set, are already like pre-posed. You don't like, all you have to do is glue them on the base and select the guns to put in their little weapon slots. So you can open this box and take a bottle of super glue and have this playable in like 15 minutes. Super cool. And then because, you know, I go in, I'm crazy. So there's this other starter box. This is their older starter box, and it's $80, but it also comes with everything you need to start. Three mechs per side, but these are more customizable. These take a little longer to build, but you can customize the pose and the arms and all that sort of stuff. And the other option is you can just buy a whole army in a box. $90 is your entire army. It comes with 7 mechs. And, you know, when you think about, like, you know, war games, like $90 for a whole army is super cheap compared to, like, you playing Warhammer 40,000, where you're probably going to spend like $2,000 to build a full army to play with.
Holy crap.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's why I never got into Warhammer.
Yeah, I go to the gaming store and I see the nerds in the back with their big setups on Saturday mornings. And, you know, I see them dumping out buckets of sand on the table so they can, and, you know, and they've got huge mechs and they're there for hours and it looks cool as hell. It also looks like something that I would not be responsible with.
Yeah, the thing I love about skirmish games is there's so many good ones out there, and they're made by independent companies, so you can support independent creators, and, you know, they're quicker and easier to play. Like most of these you can play in like an hour or less, and you're only building and painting, like for this one, like 7 models. Like you build and paint 7 models, you can play this game for a couple years and not need to upgrade your force. That's a lot different than some of your other bigger skirmish games where you're painting hundreds of models.
Yeah, it's kind of like a halfway bridge. I have some experience with Rangers of Shadow Deep. I know you're a fan of that, Brad.
Yeah.
That's
a solo play.
We played it as we actually played like a mini campaign of it, but it's quick, light, adaptable. We were like transitioning who was in the D&D group essentially. So it's just like 3 of us. 2 of us ran multiple PCs, and it was still, you know, running 2-3 guys was easier than running one D&D character because it's just much more rules light, and you can inject a lot of RP to it if you want to. It almost felt like reinventing D&D in a way, like, oh, this is how these guys got there. But yeah, it's a nice alternative and a palate cleanser and just like a nice thing to have in your back pocket in case, okay, we're not going to play a regular campaign today because someone didn't show up or whatever. Boom, this is real quick with the tools that we have, especially if we have Play-Doh and I get to squish every enemy I kill. Like, yeah, please.
Yo.
It's fun.
Yeah, well, and like the fantasy skirmish games like Frostgrave, Rangers of Shadow Deep, that sort of stuff, you can definitely like cross-pollinate your miniature collection. So if you play D&D with miniatures, a lot of the miniatures you use for D&D you can also use for like Frostgrave or rangers, and vice versa, right? So it's a good way to start collecting miniatures for your D&D game, and then it gives you a whole other game to play with them as well.
Yeah. All right. Anything else to say about wargaming?
We could talk for hours, but that's not what our channel is supposed to focus on.
Yeah. It's just a break from the onslaught of Dungeons and Dragons that will be the rest of the episode.
Something interesting, tying the last segment with the next segment. There is this sort of like, sorry, the last DMG sucked tour happening in the promotion of the new DMG. And one of the explanations I've heard is that they polled the community and they found out that, yes, indeed, most of the people who are deep into D&D, what's up, Phil? Most of the people who are deep into it are homebrewing, right? So the people who are going to hear that there's a poll from Wizards of the Coast in the design process of the new edition of the game are going to be a self-selecting group of like the deepest, nerdiest nerds. It takes one to know it. So they thought, okay, everyone's homebrewing stuff, which means they have a deep backlog of knowledge. They need page one to be how to make a pantheon, right? Like all of the missteps, a lot of the missteps in the last DMG can go back to misunderstanding their audience. It's not super approachable. Even if you are homebrewing, honestly, I don't think it was super approachable, but it left a lot of new people in the dust. And I think that's why, or it's one theory why.
Well, and I think they were largely right at that point, that most of their audience was going to be people who've already been playing D&D. I don't think they were expecting 5e to blow up as big as it did. But yeah, and so the needs of the Dungeon Master have greatly changed. I found it interesting that, you know, some content creators have recently made the videos about the 2014 DMG, and like, there's actually good stuff in here, right? Like that's been like a kind of a trend over the last like few weeks, is all these people like, oh, look at all this cool stuff that's actually in the DMG. And I think that's funny that's actually a hot topic right now.
I made that video 2 years ago, and I don't think I've seen an uptick. So check it out. I was there first.
Yeah. So this week they up until the release of the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide, the second edition of the 5th edition of Dungeons and Dragons Dungeon Master's Guide for the game Dungeons and Dragons.
I scared my dog pretending to throw my table over. Sorry, dog.
Well, when it comes out in November, they've been putting out videos. They put out a couple videos last week and a couple videos this week. Last week they're like, everything you need to know. And the videos this week were not as jam-packed, but they put out a video on magic items, magical crafting, and the DM's toolbox. And the overall impression, the main thing that I got from these videos is that James Wyatt is a silly goose. He infected Chris Perkins with his silliness. There's even a part where Perkins was bleeped because he was being so silly he swore, which was, I'm sure, who knows what he's like when he's off camera. He might drop F-bombs left and right, but it was a surprise to me. There was a lot of giggling, a lot of shenanigans and craziness in this video. Who wants to go first to talk about what they talked about?
Overall, like, again, they continue to promise good stuff, so I really hope that it's half as good as they say it's going to be, because it sounds like they've got some good stuff lined up in there. And Ryan, you're absolutely right when you said that, like, this is like the Dungeon Master's Guide apology tour. Like, every one of those videos they are talking about, well, this is all stuff that was in the 2014. We just organized it and streamlined it and made it easier to access, and then added the stuff that we kind of forgot to put in last time. Like, they said some version of that in every single video so far.
Yeah, poor guys. They're just trying to do their jobs. So when they talked about crafting...
I'm sorry, I didn't know people were actually going to read it.
I thought it was just a book of magic items.
So when they talked about crafting, they said that there's crafting in the player's handbook, but this is going to be for anything higher than a common rarity, or maybe it was common and uncommon you could do PHB. I don't remember, but it was rules for crafting higher rarities, except for artifacts, because they said artifacts are off limits.
I do, again, it might be the cynic in me, but I do see a marketing strategy to the player base to get players more interested in buying the DMG, not just the Dungeon Master, because here's the rules for Bastions, and here's the rules for magic item creation. Oh, and by the way, half of this book is a catalog of the magic items that you can make yourself, and here's the methodology you can use during downtime to circumvent your Dungeon Master from saying no. You're no longer at the whims of your Dungeon Master to hand out these magic items. You can take it into your own hands and craft it, which a lot of people want. I want.
They did specifically. James White specifically said that it was to give players more control over the items they have, since the DM decides what items are available to find. And yeah, you're right. It probably will sell more DMGs, but it will also sell future adventure books, because in the next starter set, it comes out with a really cool magic item, and a player is like, "Well, I want to craft that." For my homebrew campaign, since I can craft, my DM said I could craft anything that's official D&D magic item. So now the player is going to want to buy that book so they can have the stats for the magic item to craft it in their own homebrew campaign.
Yep, I mean that's some marketing right there. But yeah, I mean, I think crafting magic items, has always been a part of D&D at some level. Like back in 3rd edition, it was a pretty big part of it, 3rd and 3.5. But like a lot of these, the books, like the novels that have inspired Dungeons and Dragons, right, are based on magic items. Like even going back before novels, like Excalibur, King Arthur and Excalibur, right? And then of course, when we get to Tolkien and like the rings, right? And the what's his name for the guy with the life-stealing sword? I'm totally drawing a blank on is it
on Critical Role or
no the Michael Moorcock books, right? Is that who I'm thinking of?
I don't know those. Elric, yeah, I wouldn't have gotten there. Magic items are a huge part of fantasy, and I am very hopeful for downtime taking more time in the spotlight. So many D&D campaigns are like, in retrospect, that was 3 weeks. That doesn't feel right narratively. So encouraging players to spend time building a bastion, whatever, hiring people to staff it, crafting magic items. Like it gives the story side of the game time to breathe.
Right. Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is if you're not running one of those hardback adventure books, and you're not like trying to go chapter to chapter and have this tight story that runs through one of those books, if you are stitching together multiple smaller adventure module style, right, then you're gonna have more opportunities for downtime in between those different modules that you're stitching together, right? So that could be, again, that's a DM style approach. Like I definitely, when I ran 1st edition back in the day, like those campaigns covered large amounts of time in world, right? Like we weren't just like, rushing from story beat to story beat like we're writing an action movie. But I have definitely, as a DM, I have become more of that style DM with 5th edition. Like, faster pace, cliffhangers at the end of every session, diving right back in this week where we left off last week. It's an exciting way to play the game, but it does eliminate a lot of the downtime activities and those sort of things that I used to do back when I ran first edition games.
There's a lot to be said for like episodic content, right? You want an action movie? Me too. It's great for a one shot or like a 2-3 shot, but like if we're trying to play every Tuesday for the next 3 years, it's a little hard to follow the thread and make it seem natural when, you know, a week later there's a level 8 threat, you know, whatever, 2 hexes away. It's like, well, why didn't that? Why were we worried about all that other stuff? Why were we fighting rats in the basement if like the dragon was about to swoop into the village? Like,
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I intentionally took breaks in my current campaign that we just finished last night, right? The 10-month-long campaign. And I intentionally took breaks in the campaign where I told the players, all right, between now and next session, you've got 3 months of downtime. What does your character do with it? And that led one of the characters to start researching how to become a lich. So, and this was the same character who let a mind flare tadpole crawl up his nose, right?
Sure.
So his goal was to get as much power as he could by becoming a mind flare, and then become a lich and cut off his connection to the hive mind so that he wouldn't become dependent on the hive mind. And that became like the dramatic moment of the final session as he's casting his final ritual spell to become a lich to break off his connection to the hive mind, and we were rolling arcana checks like death saves, and he had to make 3 successful ones in a row, and the mind flayers were trying to stop him from becoming a lich so he wouldn't cut himself off from the hive mind. And it was like, it was close. It was 2 successes to 2 fails, and that came down to one final roll. And the rest of the party knew if he becomes a mind flayer, we are now outnumbered because it's 4 mind flayers to 3 characters.
That's bonkers.
So it was, and all that started because I gave the players space for downtime, and he hatched this plan to become a lich and all that stuff. So it was a really exciting final session.
love it.
Fun.
Also, congratulations for finishing a campaign. That doesn't always happen. I feel like the number of official campaigns that I've started is an order of magnitude higher than the number I've finished.
So one other thing about magic item crafting, they said, is that to make a magic item, you need to be proficient in Arcana, and it requires a relevant tool. They gave the example of the Wand of Magic missiles requiring woodcarver's tools, and you would have to have the magic missile spell. They didn't say prepared, but I assume they meant you have to have the spell prepared to be able to make that, which makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
You need, if you need a wand, you're going to need to be able to carve it down, right?
I love like wizard carpentry school.
Indeed.
Well, are there still rules in the new edition for learning additional proficiencies? Because that adds another layer. Like if I want to make a wand and I don't have woodworking tools if I'm not proficient in those, then that adds another layer to the downtime activities. I could spend one set of downtime learning how to be proficient in woodworking, and then the next time fashioning a wand, right? So that you could create layers to all of this, which could make downtime a little more interesting.
Is there a way to gain proficiency?
I thought there was in the 2014 version. You could gain new tool proficiencies and languages.
Yeah, languages for sure, and like tools. I don't think I don't know about skills, but tools. And languages and instruments, there were rules.
So aside from the crafting in that first video, they talked about some general things about the book, and they brought up treasure themes, which I thought was very interesting. They said that treasure is put into 4 categories: Arcana, implements, armaments, and relics. And that each monster in the 2025 Monster Manual will have a theme for its treasure. This helps DMs provide treasure to party members based on their class or what they want. like filling a dungeon with Arcana treasure for spellcasters. And I thought this was really interesting because a couple weeks ago when we looked at that Uni in the Lost Horn adventure, on those monster stat blocks next to the bugbear, it said something like loot, and it gave a line of loot. And I'm wondering if that would actually be in the monster manual. That line would actually say treasure theme, and it would say Arcana, implements, armaments, relics.
Yeah, that would make sense.
And I think it was like roll tables too. Like the DMG has roll tables for magic items, so I think it's like bugbears have armaments table A, roll twice, whereas the Lich would have Arcana table F, roll 3 times. Because that's useful. That's good. New players or new DMs or experienced DMs. Like, I loot this goblin. It's like, oh, okay, he's got a scimitar for sure and 7 copper. I don't know. Now you have concrete answers to all of those.
Yeah, scimitar, short bow, and a bag full of teeth. I don't know.
They also said that there's a lot more potion art, and they showed off a lot of the potion art. Some of the potion art is way too on the nose. Like, you show it to your player, and then we're like, oh, okay, we don't need to identify that potion. I know what that is. See the little swirling, or, oh, there's nothing in it. That's a potion of invisibility. So some of that art was too on the nose. Another thing that I did not like is that they're not putting prices on all the magic items.
Wait, what? I thought that was like the whole... I thought that was like one of the best things about this.
Here's what they said. They said that it is the same pricing info in the 2014 DMG, but, quote, we've done a better job of surfacing the info, end quote. That's what they said.
So it's like this magic item costs...
table, they bolded it, I don't know.
This potion costs between 500 and 5,000 GP. Like, that doesn't...
Yeah.
That's not helpful to me.
I agree.
Yeah. Or is it just going to be like on the chart that gives you all the common magic items are going to have a price tag at the top, and the chart that gives you all the rare magic items, there'll be a price tag at the top? Is it going to be something like that, maybe?
I don't love the reorganization and then being like, look, it's a new thing, right? Like, the DMG now has common magic items. We realized there was a lack of these more common magic items, especially with magic item crafting. We need to make available a bunch of... So we got all these new ones from Xanathars. It's like, that's not giving me new things. That's selling me the thing I own.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just reorganized and more efficient, but it's a large chunk of it is the 2014 stuff, and the next chunk of it is some Xanathar stuff, and the next chunk of it is some Tasha's stuff, and then we kind of tied a nice little bow around it to make it like look nice.
Yeah.
I didn't feel that way as much with the player's handbook because they seem to have done a lot of work on the subclasses. I didn't really feel that way with player's handbooks as much as I thought I was going to. But yeah, so I'm curious to see the DM's guide if it has, enough new stuff in it for me to be really impressed.
I agree with Nacho. No notes.
Then in the Thursday video, they put out a whole video called the DM's Toolbox about the chapter 3 of the DMG, which is basically just miscellany. They said there are a series of random rules listed alphabetically, such as alignment, creating monsters, fear, stress, traps, chases, running, ending, mapping, and settings for them. Let me say this about chases. 5e's chases are bunk. They're bad. It doesn't do chases well. If they improve chases at all, it'll be a significant improvement. If you want the system that does good chases, get Call of Cthulhu, the 7th edition. Their chase, they have a simple, brilliant, easy to track, exciting chase system. It's perfect. You don't need to go anywhere else.
I need to check that out.
I did a video on it. It's really great. It's very simple, like kind of theater of the mind way to run chases. That's very interesting. And what they said on alignment, I really liked what they said on alignment. That they
I
said
agree. Yeah.
that that behavior determines alignment, and that alignment doesn't determine behavior, which is something I've been saying for years. The
Right.
idea that alignment is not a permanent personality, and they gave the example of a chaotic neutral goblin on the side of the road. The PC stop by, chat with the goblin, win over the goblin's heart. That goblin could be chaotic good now.
Mm-hmm.
And that it's the idea that alignment is more a collection of behaviors and habits than it is actually your driving force, which, thank God. I'm
Yeah.
saying they should do this forever.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm hoping that alignment section is good. I definitely put that into more than one of my feedback surveys from Wizards of the Coast when I was filling out all those UA surveys, for sure. The alignment needs some better explanation and clarification.
Yeah. There's also a section on guidance specifically for using doors, which is funny. And they said something like that it's the most common gate or the most common barrier that you encounter in D&D, and they needed more guidance on different door types, armor class, hit points. And the other section that they mentioned I thought was very funny, or not so much funny, but you'll see in a second. There's an expanded section on death. It says they describe death scenes, how to handle death, and how to give dying PCs the spotlight. And I was like, oh, all the OSR nerds are screaming right now. The people who hate death saves, you're going to tell us like how to make death more special. That's going to make a lot of people angry, but and that amused me.
Well, if you think about it, though, those two topics you just mentioned, doors and death, could also be, especially talking about them back to back, or like they did in the video, could be a big nod to Critical Role. Like trouble getting past doors was an ongoing joke in the first season of Critical Role, and one of the things that makes Critical Role so watchable is how the players respond when somebody is close to death, right? They make it dramatic because they're good actors, right?
And Matt Mercer uses a homebrewed resurrection system.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, he's got his special, very narrative special thing. You don't just let them cast the revivify or raise dead and get back on their feet. There's a whole big thing. It takes half an episode.
Yeah, it's like a role-playing encounter built around resurrection, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wonder if they were picking the minds of the critters on those two topics.
Well, I did something like that, and I made a video about it where I was running 5e for a group, and one of them died, and the other players really wanted that PC to come back, so they went on a big resurrection quest, because I made resurrection very, very hard to achieve in my world. So they had to go on this big quest, and then finally at the end, I made it a huge boss battle, where essentially they found a monk who could cast the Raise Dead spell. It drew the death out. Now the death was in the room. And so it became like a skill challenge where the death was trying to get back in and kill that person. Like, no, you're supposed to stay dead. And they had to prevent the death from re-killing their friend through, like, it wasn't a combat encounter. They couldn't actually hurt it, but they tried all kinds of different things to prevent them from contacting each other and keep them apart. And it was very exciting. I think it came out well. They were pretty happy with it.
I'm stealing that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And I think there's a middle ground between like 5e's death is inconsequential because it doesn't really exist, and like the OSR meat grinder mindset of like, no, characters don't matter, they're gonna die. Where like I like death being on the table because it's a significant moment, because it's like one of the most powerful story beats.
Yeah, well, I stole the idea from Daggerheart to put the like going out in a blaze of glory as part of my death saves. So we only roll one death save. You either make it or you don't. But you can automatically pass it if you take a permanent injury, which is a -2 to one of your stats, right? Or you can automatically fail it, but you score an automatic critical hit before you die. That's the Blaze of Glory.
Yep.
And so one of my characters went out in a Blaze of Glory last night in our final session of the campaign, and it was a really cool moment. And like building mechanics in like that makes, I think hits that sweet spot that Ryan you're talking about, somewhere between where death is so common that you just expect players to die, and the death is so uncommon that nobody's ever going to die. Narratively, you want that threat of death, but you want that death to be spectacular, meaningful, right? So that's a real sweet spot when you can find a way to achieve that in your gameplay.
Daggerheart has a great system there. There were a couple other things they mentioned. Advice for running mobs, like running groups. They said, Chris Perkins said that it was especially good for Theater of the Mind, which doesn't often get enough love in these books. I run Theater of the Mind sometimes. I used to run it all the time. And I still run it sometimes because it's just so much faster. Yeah. You can go from an argument to initiative to the first hit in 45 seconds as compared to getting out a physical map or going to Chain Peku, searching around desperately to find a map that looks like what I've described the market as.
I always loved what's that giant shining crystal thing in the middle? It's like, I don't
that's
know.
Not there.
Hold on,
it's
let
not
me
actually there.
It's not there. Yeah, that's usually pretend it's not there.
The other thing they mentioned, a couple other things they mentioned, loyalty. There's a loyalty chart or gauge now, like a measure of tracking NPC demeanor. They gave an example, like if the PCs hire a crew on a ship, and you're going on a long cross-sea voyage, it's good to track the crew's loyalty during that time, which I thought was an interesting mechanic. I like that. And supernatural gifts. They've described there's apparently a section with a bunch of boons that are like magic items, but without the item. So as alternate rewards that a deity or a powerful creature can just boop, you have Misty Step every round now.
Is that the same as the Marks of Prestige? Is that?
I don't know.
That's something I wrote down while I was listening to the video.
Marks of Prestige.
Yeah, when I wrote that down while I was listening to the video, and I think
it's like alternate rewards, like the king is going to give you land and like that sort of, which again was in the was buried somewhere within the 2014 handbook.
Yeah, but the idea that you can give out treasure that's not just gold, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. The other thing I noticed, because you mentioned the mobs, they didn't go into it in any detail. They just briefly mentioned siege weapons. So if there's siege weapon rules and there's mob rules, can we put those together and have mass combat rules?
Feels like it.
So that's something I'll be interested to see when we get into the new DMG.
They'll probably say, yes, if you buy that Dragonlance board game that nobody talked about 2 days after it came out.
Yeah, that was like so unpopular. It was like in the bargain bin for, a fraction of the price. They also mentioned fear and mental stress, and ways to track that by using psychic damage. So there might actually be like a psychic damage amount assigned to certain stressful situations. I thought that would be an interesting, mechanic to use. They talked about environmental effects and planar effects, like how to put those into your dungeon, like excessive heat or pouring rain or those kind of things. I thought that would be interesting to look at. They also said there were tools in there for designing your own dungeon, and creating themes and characters for your dungeon. I thought that was pretty cool, which we had that in the 2014 version too, but I'll be interested to see like what if anything they did different to it.
There was, I don't know if it was specific. What did I
there was anything. We played with Play-Doh earlier. That actually happened.
I scared my dog doing a bit. I don't know if it was just it was traps or environmental hazards or all of the above, but they did talk about scaling guidelines as well, which I like.
Right.
Nice.
They talked about ways to level up like your traps.
Yeah.
Like basically the same way you would level up a spell by casting it at a higher level. You can take their pre-made traps that are in there, and there'll be ways to make them for higher level characters. So traps and environmental hazards, ways to increase the damage output on those. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I don't know why they need a section on leveling up traps. I mean, it's good, but it should be a simple formula, right? It should be like the trap, if it's a lethal trap, then it's like D10 or D12s equal to their hit dice.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a medium trap, it's D6s equal to their hit dice, or if it's a minor trap, it's D4s equal to their hit dice. You could just use that because that's roughly, and you can do damage on any trap with just that simple formula.
That's
D4,
a good
6s,
point.
or 12 equal to their hit dice.
Yeah, if you make it equal to their hit dice, that's a good measure. Because the reality is, if I drop a rock on you, no matter what level you are, that should do a shit ton of damage.
Yeah.
And if hit points is a representation of your ability to, avoid taking damage, right? Like we kind of talk about hit points as not just flesh and blood. It's your ability to dodge. It's the fact that you're a seasoned fighter and you know how to block and all those sort of things. If all that's taken into hit points, dropping a giant boulder on you from some kobold trap, is not going to take those things into account. So that's a perfect way to translate that by saying traps do damage equal to your hit dice. I like that.
Well, thank you. It's been working out for me for a while. I've been able to improvise some traps just based
But the
on
whole simple, approachable design ethos of that does kind of conflict with the whole design of 5 and 5.5. It doesn't really fit the mood here of overly complex and confusing for no reason that we've been going for 10 years.
Well, Ryan, change starts with a single step. So I'm here.
Whoa.
Well,
You're a hero to us all, too.
Well, one of the things you have to factor in, Ryan, is that 5th edition is an amalgam of all the previous editions, right?
Yes.
Right.
It's not. They've confused E edition with A edition.
Yeah. So they're obviously we still have like residual stuff from like 1st edition that really doesn't make sense and we don't really use anymore, like ability scores, right? Ability scores versus ability score bonuses. We don't really need the score, you just need the bonus to run the game. But then there's also leftovers from the 3rd and 4th edition eras where there's a lot of this I want clear math on how to do this the right way, right? There's still some of that in the game that's left over from those editions. And again, it goes back to, I think you're trying to write a game for a very broad audience.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. You're trying to appease the 3rd edition gamer. You're trying to appease the 1st edition gamer. You're trying to, help the 4th edition folks feel welcome, even though they're not.
Indeed.
And to be fair, they've done a successful job tackling an impossible task. This D&D is trying to be all things to all people in the TTRPG space, and in other spaces sometimes, unfortunately, inappropriately. And yeah, it's very difficult. So it's like, here is this very tight mathematical structure that you can completely toss aside and run by vibes.
Right.
And it's almost true both ways. And you can make it true with a little bit of finagling and effort on your end. So it is impressive. It is impressive. And it's the most successful version the game has ever had. It's easy to get mad at it, but yeah. Same.
Bill makes a great point that rulings require a stable base of rules. You need enough crunch to give consistent frame for your rulings. I think that's a really good point. And if you put enough crunch in your game, the people who want to run a crunchy game can play rules as written. The people who want a really crunchy game can add to it, and the person who wants a more casual game can streamline it, right? So you kind of hit that middle spot, and then it's kind of useful for everybody.
Yeah, for me, the dividing line is: does the game have rules about how high or far you can jump? If there's a specific rule about it, then it's a complex game. If the rule is roll a d6 and we'll see how far and high you can jump, that's a streamlined game.
What if there are rules, but nobody knows or uses them?
Then you've got Dungeons and Dragons.
That's the perfect example, because for years in original 5th edition from 2014 on, nobody knew those jump rules, but they were in there.
Yeah. What's your strength score? Forget it. Just make an athletics check.
Athletics check. I have a 5.5 story from my Wednesday D&D game that I'm just a player in our high-level D&D game. For complicated reasons, a PC got separated from the party, so it would take several sessions to reunite us. So this player asked the DM, can I play a new character during that time? So rolled up a new, this guy, I think he drinks because he's pretty sauced by the end of the sessions. It's online, so I don't know. But he always plays barbarians because he knows how to play barbarians. When he tries to play other things, he gets confused. So he rolled up a new barbarian, and he rolled up a 5.5 barbarian. Compare his old PC was the 16th level barbarian. New PC, 16th level 5.5 barbarian. We had a boss battle. This new barbarian just devastated. We were all jaws on the floor when this barbarian is doing 60, 80 damage just from 2 attacks. And he had a feat that allowed him to add proficiency bonus to every single attack. And it was just bonkers. We were all astounded. How do you balance this? Because it was a boss battle that was over halfway through the second round. And our DM was just I don't even know what to throw at you guys. This encounter should have killed all of you.
And that's because he was playing the 2024 barbarian?
Yeah, I mean, his old barbarian was great too, but this one, it was demonstrably different, had a demonstrable effect. This one PC changing had a demonstrable effect on the whole encounter with all the rest of us playing 5.0 PCs.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how it goes because, like I said, we just finished. So next week is session 0. Well, next week I'm out of town, but then the week after that is session 0, and then we're starting a new campaign with the new rules. So I'm curious to see how it goes.
This is such a great image in my mind. I don't even... That's even better with out context. Just
Dark Sun bullying Strixhaven.
Get
Give me
back
your
to
milk
Hogwarts.
money.
You Harry Potter magic knockoff.
Strixhaven, that was a big disappointment. We could talk about that sometime. We could talk about what a disappointment Strixhaven was.
Yeah. Well, this is a good question. Do you think he'll want to play that separated PC again?
Oh yeah, he has to, because he has a very crucial magic item that belongs to the party. And what's weird is I had it in my inventory sheet, but then a few sessions ago, he just decided that he had it. And I was like, yes, and okay, I guess you have it now. And then he gets tossed to a different dimension, and we're like, crap, we need that magic item, man. So yeah, he's on his way back.
But will he retool his old character with 2024 rules?
I don't know. How do you go back? Once you could do 30 damage with a non-critical hit, you're doing 30 damage just swinging an axe. How do you go back?
Yeah.
My Tuesday night game, we've had both concurrently. I'm letting everybody just it's kind of a free for all right now as far as character creation and respecing goes.
Yeah.
And we pretty quickly proved the theory that yes, you can have old, like whatever, 2014 and 2024 characters playing the same game at the same table. And also my theory that you don't want to.
Well,
You're not going to want to continue playing 2014 characters if someone at the table is playing a 2024 character.
Here's something. Here's a quandary for you then, for both of you. In 2024, the luck feat got a big nerf because before it was a reroll. Now it is you get advantage, which you have to decide before you make the roll. That is a huge nerf. Everybody knows Lucky was the best feat in the game. Without a doubt, 3 rerolls every game day is unbeatable. And now here's the thing. They nerfed Lucky, but as a balance, they have buffed Heroic Inspiration. Heroic Inspiration used to be advantage. Now it's a reroll of any die once per day, or once, while you have it. If you get extra inspiration, you can give it to somebody else. So it would seem like overall those two things balance themselves out. However, in this Wednesday game I played, the Dungeon Master doesn't use inspiration. He never gives it out. So if we move over to that Lucky feat, it's just a nerf. There's nothing in the system to balance it out. So that's, I don't know. What do you guys think about that? I would say balance is in the eye. Balance is a myth. It's made up on the spot in the Dungeon Master's brain, and we just pretend like we knew what we were doing the whole time. I don't know. What do you guys think about that situation?
Yeah, that's interesting. And that could be, that could be a hot topic at some point where you have players complaining loudly online about DMs who don't use inspiration, right? It could, because that could very well make an even bigger difference in how the game runs, right? If you're using it or you're not, right? And kind of like the way using feats and not using feats was with 2014. There were, in the beginning there were people who weren't using feats, and there was such an outcry that, next thing you know, DMs are giving everybody a feat at first level.
Yeah.
I wish there were, and maybe we'll see them in the DMG, like alternate ways to distribute heroic inspiration. Like Pathfinder 2nd Edition, you start every session, you have inspiration. You have that one chip you can cash in. You can't bank it, it doesn't stack. That cleans it up, because giving the Dungeon Master another additional job is bad design. Handing out a chip to every player at the beginning of a session that they can spend giving to somebody else doing a cool thing with the right kind of people at your table. I really like that idea a lot. Balancing the game on an aspect that people aren't generally using that much. I'd be interested to see data on how many tables are actually using inspiration versus aren't, but like anecdotally, there's not that much inspiration going around these days.
Yeah, I never used to hand it out either, because I found, according to the book, it says you give it out when somebody does good role playing. I'm like, I don't want to be constantly monitoring that like some home audio, Alexa device, just listening in constantly. That's good role playing. You get inspiration. So what I did was I just made it so that you get inspiration on a nat 1.
Oh, that's not bad.
And that just lessens the sting of the nat 1, then players aren't so upset. I don't have to track it. It's entirely up to them to keep track of it.
Yeah, I like that. I toyed around with that. I did that for a campaign, and that seemed to like make my job easier. And when I stopped doing that, I stopped giving out inspiration, because it's just one more thing to track, like you said.
And it does feel like training wheels to a degree. Like I did inspiration when I had a table of new people. I was a brand new Dungeon Master. Okay, cool. Like, here's a cookie. You did good. But eventually you want everybody doing good role play, being true to the character all of the time. And then if you hand out inspiration every time, now the game's broken in the other direction. Or broken in the same direction.
Yeah, my problem with that as a player was when I first started playing 2014 was that I was looking for my cookie, right? Because I'm thinking like a war gamer. Yes. This is a resource I need to access and then spin so I can access it again, right? So I'm doing my roleplay stuff, and I keep like waiting to get my advantage, right? Because it's part of the system, right? So I've not really found advantage to be like, inspiration to be that that useful of a tool. I like the idea of it, like you guys are talking about, give it out to everybody at the beginning of a day, or give it out when you roll a 1, or give it out when you roll a 20 or something like that.
I just want to say what's up to Polar Nights. I didn't know anyone was watching on Twitch. Everybody else is on YouTube. If you want to come over on YouTube. You can watch on Twitch if you want. I stream there too, but I think I have. You might be the first person to ever watch one of my Twitch streams. Mike says heroic inspiration is reinforcement for the GM desired behavior, which I like that idea. I like the idea of that. Like, I can hand out inspiration to tell my players how I want them to roleplay, and to, as some kind of positive reinforcement. And, I'm BF Skinner here, operantly conditioning them of like, they do good, you get inspiration, bing, here's the bell. That's not operant. That's, anyway, it doesn't matter.
Classical conditioning.
I mean, to reinforce this, perhaps, which I don't necessarily feel good about, but I'll take it, man.
Ming the Merciless, yeah.
Ming the Merciless is awesome. So
I'll take it. I got some complex feelings to sort through after the show, but I want my players to embrace failure. So inspiration doesn't help me do that. I want my players to lean into the downbeats as much as the upbeats. So to undermine every downbeat doesn't quite give me the experience I'm looking for.
Yeah. The on the Ming the Merciless thing, though, from now on, Ryan, you have to wear a collared shirt in every episode and pop the collar, so you're even more Ming.
Well, today, just an hour ago, I was like, I need a Hawaiian shirt for Casual Fridays. So that might be the balance. It'll be a Hawaiian shirt with a collar popped. Oh God, I hate this version of me, but anything for the bit.
Anything for the bit.
Oh, that's hilarious.
You committed to sparkle motion or not?
I'm beginning to doubt your dedication to sparkle motion.
Saddest scene in a movie ever.
But to your point, Ryan, about embracing failure, that was one of the other fun things. I know I keep talking about the last session of our campaign, but the boss monster they were fighting had the ability to give out disadvantage as a legendary action. And
like, right? No save. That's no like one of the best things about that fight. It's I was like judicious with that, but yeah.
So the rogue was constantly hitting the rogue with that ability. So the rogue's not able to pop off their sneak attack damage because because the disadvantage would always offset their advantage. And my player's actually frustrated, but he's also doing a really good job of role playing that frustration in character. But what he did in the combat was he made sure that he didn't get hit, right? So so everybody else keeps getting stunned by the monster, he's the only one doing consistent damage, even though it's like chip damage because he can't get a sneak attack off. And then that's the character that went out in a blaze of glory. So it was like the embracing the failure of, well, I can't really damage this monster. What can I do? Well, I can make sure that I don't get hit with this stun attack. And that's going to be my job, to at least be the one person who stays constantly conscious. And then in the end, that all that frustration, role-playing wise, culminates in, I'm determined to kill this thing. I'm going to go down in a blaze of glory to make sure it's dead, even if it kills me in the process. And I think that's a really good example of that, how you can take embracing failure and turn it into like a heroic moment. And that's the art of, good role play.
It's like, it's one of, if not the best possible outcome. Like, that your D&D character is going to ride off into the sunset on a wagon full of gold. All right, interesting. Your character is going to die fighting this eldritch horror and taking it down with him. Like, oh, cool. Like, that's the story we're going to be telling around the campfire in 20 years,
First, Polar Nights. I know where Norway is. It's next to Sweden. This is maybe a good thing for us to go out on, since we're definitely not gonna have time to talk about the player's handbook today. What sort of changes will you implement if the 2024 rules are broken and classes are too powerful? I like a lot of the little rules, like the new surprise rule. I like a lot of the little changes.
You like the new surprise rule?
I do like it.
Rabble. Okay.
Well, one of the things that I've already started implementing, because I just roll low dice. I just do. Like I don't know what it is. I've been playing this game for 40 years, and like I know it's probably in my head, but it's really hard not to feel like I always roll low. But so one of the things I started doing though is I take the static damage for the monster's attack, and I just take that static number and I roll a d6, and I add the d6 to that static number. Mm-hmm. So that way I get a variable of monster damage, but I'm constantly staying around, the average amount of damage. So I'm never like rolling a bunch of ones and only doing a little bit of damage. I'm also not rolling really high, but I don't usually roll high. So, for me, that's been a way to get consistent damage output out of my monsters, and it actually streamlines play, because when my monsters attack, I'm only rolling a d6 for damage and adding it to the static number. I don't have to pick up, where are my d4s? I need 4 d4s, or I need 66, or whatever. It speeds up combat, and it puts out a more consistent amount of damage. Mm-hmm. That's one little trick I've started using.
Yeah. Brian, what do you think?
I don't know if any of my players are watching, but like 90% of the time, monsters have max HP. They've had for years. That's the only way the fight goes 3 rounds most of the time. Occasionally things go sideways and I bring it down, but like I start at 11 and I'll take the HP down. Because the cardinal sin is adding HP in the middle of the fight, right? So like if you do it in prep, then you're not cheating.
Is adding HP in the middle of a fight different than a second wave of enemies?
I love that too. I am a big fan of bringing fights together. I really think that's how you achieve encounter balance and the real adventuring day. Waves of enemy. That was like one of the first videos I made. It's probably it is a terrible video, but like waves of enemy, that is how you get that epic feeling, especially at early levels where it doesn't take 35 minutes to get through a round of combat. Yeah. I love waves.
Yeah. I've always used waves of monsters, and it is a much more fun and exciting way to balance an encounter. Because you can either, if you have 3 waves in your mind, you can only use 2 if the players are rolling really poorly, or the second wave only has 2 goblins instead of 4 goblins, and then the third wave is just the bugbear instead of a bugbear and 2 more goblins, right? You can kind of customize those second and third waves to help you balance the encounter. But yeah, I'm a big believer in waves of monsters.
Everybody watching, we started this by talking about published adventures and how, like, even if you don't run them, you can rip them up for spare parts and lessons and encounters. The second chapter of Tales from the Yawning Portal is a remake of a 3rd edition module. Oh God, we called it the Mountain Door. I'm thinking of my homebrew name now. Shoot.
The Forge of something?
Forge of Fury. Thank you so much.
Yep.
I reskinned it. Forge of Fury, the initial thing, like you can go through room by room if you're very smart and clever, but like in the very beginning, there's a sidebar. This is what happens if this group of militant orcs knows they're under attack. This is how many rounds it takes for this room to show up, and this room to show up, and this room to show up. Because odds are they're going to knock on the front door of this fortress. You're not going to fight these guys one at a time. I put a drummer in there just to like telegraph to the players that this place was coming at them. But like it feels so much more realistic than these guys are 12 feet away. and they don't join this fight, they're gonna wait for you to come to them, like, because
Oh.
the door was closed. Like,
The two guys next door are getting their asses kicked. Ha ha ha! Let's hide in here until the adventurers come in here.
yeah,
No,
I'm
they-
winning this hand of dice, so I'm gonna keep.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a video about that where I talk about waves of monsters and in dungeon design, I actually give you a little free dungeon, like you can download the dungeon map that goes with it and everything in that video. I'm kind of proud of that one.
So I think we are about out of time. We all need to go plug back in to start to begin our regeneration process. I shouldn't have said that out loud. We'll cut that out.
Go back to
Cut this
Muncie.
whole- Cut this whole part out.
Don't tell people about the pods, Jim.
I don't have an update for Faye Muncie. Unfortunately, I am currently having a squabble with a night manager that works at the self-storage facility. Because when I come out of the storage facility, I don't control. When I go, see, there's this portal in my storage unit in my self-storage facility that takes me to a Faye version of Muncie, Indiana. When I go in there, I don't, like, time is wonky. When I come back, I don't know when I'm coming out. So I often come out at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I've been caught trespassing on my self-storage. It's self-storage, but there's certain hours you can go. So the police were called, there was an incident, and so I'm currently trying to get my way back into the self-storage, but I'm feuding with a very pig-headed assistant manager who works there. So hopefully I'll have more updates on that in the future.
Incredible.
This excuse for missing an episode has turned into the most elaborate of stories.
There's a lot more. There's a whole arc.
I'm looking forward to it.
There's a whole arc. Hey, if you're watching the show late, go back to the beginning. We did a game show at the beginning that was fun.
Yeah.
And there's Play-Doh.
And then there was a Play-Doh segment. That's a real thing that happened. Anyway, so we're gonna get out of here. So down here saying goodbye is.
Oh, it's me. I'm Ryan. I have a YouTube channel. It's called Ready Retable. You all know that already. Come. Thanks for hanging out.
Yeah, it's right there on his thing. Look just down below his name. It says @r.doyle. And over here is.
I'm Brad Wolf with Dire Den. I do the YouTube thing too, which most of you already know.
And I am Jim Heskett, aka GM Jim, aka Wizard Sling, aka the savior of Faye Muncie. Hopefully someday. I'm working on it. Those people need me. I've got to get back there. All right. Well, this is us, and we'll see you soon.
Have a great weekend, everybody.